Hello, everybody. After seeing a lot of 50 Cent pop up on my YouTube Shorts feed promoting this documentary series, I thought that I would give it a review. I'm going to be talking about Puff Diddy The Reckoning. Uh, Please do me a favor and stay until the end of the review and let me know what you think at the end. And if you like my review, please like and subscribe to my channel. So the it's a four-part documentary about the rise and fall of Puff Daddy, and it was produced by 50 Cent. And the reason it was produced by 50 Cent is that he is a guy, 50 Cent is a guy who really, really, really is a hater. And he has like grudges with a bunch of different people. And I think the one with Puff Daddy is sort of motivated by the fact that Puff Daddy, kind of like Bill Cosby, different generation and different field of business and art, but still a guy who was really respected for his contributions to music and society, but he kind of took advantage of, his position to, I don't want to be graphic, but to please himself. I mean that metaphorically and literally. So it's in four parts and it chronicles the rise and fall of Puff Diddy. And I have seen a lot of this information because when he was charged, I watched a documentary from the BBC where it talked to some of the same people, but the documentary that I watched was about 45 minutes and it was only focused on the the charges that he currently is convicted for. And this documentary paints a much broader picture of who Puff Daddy is, like how he was when he was growing up, and why that kind of had an influence on him going throughout the years, and also some things which kind of had an influence on his not influence, but some of the things that he's done in his life, which are a little bit or completely morally or criminally dubious. So Puff Daddy, he became involved in the hip hop scene in the late 80s and early 90s, and he was throwing parties, and these parties got like bigger and bigger, and it would always be like Puff Daddy's Fest, whatever, like number one, Puff Daddy's party, like what this, and so he had this idea to throw a charity hip hop basketball sort of event in a college, and it was his first event that he organized like this, and through a combination of inexperience and neglect, they didn't really think the plan through, and people kind of there were like, so basically the event was really really hyped and the tickets were actually quite limited, so about 10 times more people arrived at the event than the venue could actually handle. And instead of having like good security and measures to like stop the people, they like ran inside and then they were crushed. So 9 people were killed, and this was kind of the responsibility of Puff Daddy and the company that he was working for at the time, and he kind of like evaded responsibility for it. And this would be like a factor in numerous situations. And I think in this case, he was more lucky than manipulative. And I think later, because he becomes more and more wealthy, he's more and more manipulative. So he's working for a record company called Uptown Records, and he's being kind of groomed as a protege by the founder of that company. And he decides, well, the founder fires him basically, but he still kind of likes him. So so at the time he's fired, he is producing an album because he was in charge of creative, like VIP of marketing or whatever. So he uh, is producing an album, and I think that he produced some albums for. I'm not sure if this happened before or after, like Mary J. Blige and another other famous people of the time. But anyway, so at this time, he was working on producing the debut album of Notorious B.I.G. So, Biggie. So basically he gets fired. Puff Daddy gets fired, and his former boss says, "Okay, you're fired, but you can still work on this album." So they have to find funding, and they release the album, and they release it under the imprint of Bad Boy Records. So Bad Boy Records becomes this big phenomenon in the '90s, and this is like the second part of his sort of criminal misdeeds, because somebody says, like a friend of his from his childhood says that he was a paper gangster. So basically, he had a lot of power and control in the real world of business, but he also wanted like the street cred, because the main rival for Bad Boy Entertainment was Death Row Records, and a lot of the artists in Death Row, of course, actually did have connections to gangs and gang violence and stuff. So I was always under the impression that the East West conflict between hip hop in the East and the West was kind of like a more organic thing, but it wasn't really that organic. And organic, I mean, like, they just decided that they didn't like each other, but it really boils down to Puff Daddy's character. So Biggie was getting more and more popular, and Biggie was friends with Tupac from the West Coast. And Tupac was getting more and more popular, and he was popular with the ladies and all of that stuff. And Tupac was getting so so basically, the argument that they make in the documentary is that Puff Daddy was really jealous of Tupac and the West Coast, so he wanted to get some beef going between um, Biggie and Tupac. And there would be like these things in the media where people would like go back and forth. And there was another artist who I've forgotten the name of, but basically he was working for Bad Boy Records, and he wanted to go to Death Row Records, and there was a an awards event where Suge Knight basically said, like, if you're tired of your producer wanting to be in all of your videos and you want to be taken care of, come to Death Row Records. And he was speaking specifically of this one guy. And I think if you had a little bit of more humor and self-reflection, you probably would at that point. Because what happens is Puff Daddy gets on stage too, and he says, one love. We just love all of your, we respect everything. And like he's putting on this public face of being like really, really supportive and stuff. But he's absolutely furious. So he's angry, and but I think how he could have handled that better would have been just to say, like, make some kind of joke about it, like, oh, if you like your producer being in all of your videos, why not come to Bad Boy Entertainment? Something like that. And then it would have been a little, humor would have cut the tension down a little bit. So there is this tension because Bad Boy Entertainment also was exploiting their artists, and exploiting musical artists is not something that is new in the musical business. What is probably new is that here, in this case, it's black entrepreneurs doing it to black artists, right? So that's new. Capitalism is wonderful, I guess. Um, so anyway, back to the main plot of the story. Suge Knight comes to New York, and they're at some kind of party, and basically Suge is with his friends, and his friend, well, a friend, and his friend gets shot and killed. And it's not clear exactly what happens, but Suge believes that Puff Daddy is behind it because also Puff Daddy has gotten connections with the Crips, and Death Row Records had connections with the Bloods. So it's becoming like it's like just this like commercial problem between these two companies, and because of Puff Daddy's personality, it gets more and more like gangster and mafia and like organized crime type of thing. So Sue gets shot at. Then there's a situation where Tupac is in New York and he gets shot at, and the documentary alleges that Puff Daddy went to L.A. and he met with members of the Crips, and he said, "If you kill Tupac and Suge Knight, I don't, I'm pronouncing his name wrong. Sorry. If you kill Knight and Tupac, we are going to give you $1 million. Like Puff Daddy is going to give you $1 million." And these were like low level gangsters in the Crip organization, and one actually was paid 500,000. And the idea is that they weren't paid the full price because Tupac was the person who was shot, and Knight actually survived. And then later, uh, Puff Daddy, I'm going to keep calling him Puff Daddy because I think it's funnier than calling him Diddy, although that's funny too. So he hires a woman who turns out to be best friends with uh, the mother of one of Knight's kids. So, and he says to her, like, if anything goes wrong between Knight and me, I'm gonna kill you, basically, as revenge. So, the documentary lays it out that um, Puff Daddy might have had direct connections to killing Tupac. And I don't know, I've heard that theory before, and I think it's plausible, but it's never been proven in the court. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of the people who arranged it, if it did happen, are dead. And Puff Daddy is already getting in trouble for other things, and he's not going to be saying, "Yeah, yeah, I killed him. I killed him. I put out a hit on him." But it kind of makes sense according to his personality, because his personality is because basically he's an abused little kid, and his mom, because his dad died when he was very young, and his dad left them a lot of money, so he never had any problems growing up financially. But his mom whipped him, beat him, and probably exposed him to behavior that was not appropriate to see as a child. So, because his dad was dead, he kind of idolized his dad, and he thought that his dad was this like real gangster guy. So that led to all of this kind of like fronting as a guy who has a lot more power than other people, like street power, because of course he would have like corporate power and commercial power later. So there's like a couple of things you can see that he is like irresponsible with the accident that happened at the college during that event. And you can see that he does have like these wannabe connections with organized crime. He gets arrested multiple times because there was so he was at a club and he shot his gun and a woman got her nose blown off, and basically they ruled that as an accident. So you can see that he is becoming more and more powerful, and the consequences of his actions are decreasing the more and more powerful he gets. So anyway, Tupac gets killed, and in retaliation, well, this is also crazy because Biggie is still alive. He has this sort of, he's up for some awards, and he has this kind of press junket that's been arranged. So he's supposed to go to Europe, and Puff Daddy really wants him to go to LA. So finally he goes to LA. He's supposed to be there like 3 days. And then Puff Daddy wants to throw a party, and everybody's like, no, 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 don't throw a party because, he has these associations with the Crips, and the Bloods are in LA too, and they don't like it. So, Biggie is supposed to stay for 3 days, and Puff Daddy convinces him to stay longer, and he gets shot and he gets killed. And he also, this is a conspiracy theory that nobody has brought up yet, but I'm just going to say it. I have no proof. It's just my imagination. It could be true. So, Puff Daddy eliminates Tupac, right? According to the earlier theory. He tries to eliminate the head of Death Row Records, and Biggie wanted more money because Bad Boy Entertainment didn't really fulfill its promises to its artists ever. So Biggie wanted more money. He wanted like a better deal, and so Puff Daddy agreed to the deal, and then he told his business manager, like, change some pages later, and the business manager was, no, 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 I'm not going to do that. So the theory, my theory, no proof whatsoever, my theory would be that Puff Daddy actually arranged a hit on Biggie as well. And the reason is because he didn't want to pay him more money, and also he wanted to kind of launch his own career. And what better way to launch your career when you're mourning your best friend, right? And I guess they weren't actually that close. Like, it was more of a business relationship. But Biggie dies, and Puff Daddy throws this big funeral for him and makes the family pay for it. And he releases this single called Missing You, where you have him rap badly over a sample from The Police. Or maybe it's Sting. I don't know. So, I don't know. I don't think that anybody has ever said Puff Daddy is my favorite rapper. Like, oh yeah, I love Puff Daddy. Like, of that era, Puff Daddy's name never comes up. So yeah, anyway, he continues on with his musical career. He has a few more hits. He does a big song, and this is probably where I personally became aware of Puff Daddy. So he did this big song for the Godzilla the American Godzilla movie that was a bit of a flop that came out in 1999, I think, called Come With Me. And it has a big riff from Led Zeppelin. So basically his most famous hits are all him rapping badly over other hits, So there's not a lot of creativity or, personality in his work. So his career kind of like slowly fades away, and he kind of steps back into the idea that he's a mogul, and he goes on reality television where he has a show called Making the Band, where he has like 4 or 5 seasons or something, and the bands on Making the Band sign this deal where basically they get nothing. And one of the winners of this competition, she takes the contract to the lawyer, and the lawyer laughs. It's like, this is how they say, you sign your soul away for fame and fortune. You're just signing your soul away for fame with this contract. And she signs it anyway because it's Bad Boy Entertainment. So this continues like a 10-year period, I guess. And when the reality TV era ends, he creates another band with 2 women, and they have like a single, like a good album or popular album, I guess. And then more recently, last year, he did another album where he was working on it for like a year, and he could barely rap because he can't rap. He's not a good rapper. He raps as good as I do. He has people who write his raps. So, um, yeah, all through this time, the third part of the crimes of Puff Daddy were happening, which is his sexual assault of both men and women. So this is where he becomes a lot like Bill Cosby because he's drugging people, he's doing things to people that are not consensual, and the there's so many people in the documentary. There are 100 cases against him, civil cases, and this is apart from the one that he was convicted on. So 100 cases of him allegedly sexually assaulting people. And it's really funny because, you know, you can be wrongly convicted. You can be wrongly. So it does happen that people are wrongly accused of things because somebody wants money or whatever, or just because somebody is in the wrong place at the wrong time. But usually, if somebody is wrongly accused of one crime and wrongly convicted of one crime, it's not like they have 199 other cases which are very, very similar lurking around. You know? It doesn't usually happen that way. So you can see that he has a pattern of abuse. There's this famous scene that was recorded on camera where he was beating up his girlfriend, Cassie. And yeah, and there are, so people talk on the documentary about him kind of like drugging them, both men and women, and how they would wake up. And this one guy who was working on his last album, he says that he woke up and he was next to a woman he didn't remember, or him, you know. So, and there's a big theme like that, and then you would have these parties called freakouts, and I think the documentary does a really good job because, and maybe this is because there were a lot of famous people at those parties, but the focus is not the salacious details of those parties. The focus is on what they can actually prove. And in the documentary, they have footage of Puff Daddy right before he's arrested for this last thing that got him sent to prison. And there really isn't any actual need for that, you know, because he it doesn't really contribute to the narrative of the story. It's just, I think, 50 Cent flexing on Puff Daddy, saying like, look, I can get this and I can prove that you're not a great guy. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm trying to arrange my thoughts and give you like a just my personal opinion about it. So I believe a lot of the allegations are true. I would say like 97% of everything that's mentioned in the documentary seems to be true because, as I said, I saw the people who are in this documentary in the BBC documentary speaking about it last year, and they didn't really change their mind. And if you look, I don't know if Puff Daddy really ordered the hit on Tupac, but it kind of makes sense. And my allegation or my conspiracy theory that maybe he ordered a hit on Biggie also kind of makes sense. So I have two things though that I was thinking when I was watching this documentary that I kind of I want to mention. The first thing is that as I said, I watched this because 50 Cent has been on this promotional tour and he's been talking about this documentary that he produced. And a lot of it is really like Yes, Puff Daddy did some horrible things, but can you believe he slept with men? Like, there seems to be this homophobia towards it too, which, I mean, is really rooted in that time period, right? And I don't know about hip hop now, I don't really follow it, but I think it just seems a little bit like the problem is not that he is having, and no one actually, well, they do say that he did sleep with men, but the problem is not that he slept with men. It's the problem that he drugged and raped them. That's different. And I think we need to be clear about what the allegations are. The allegations are sexual assault. And it's weird because so I'm supposed to say on YouTube essay, right? Because, people don't want to get demonetized or whatever. But in Netflix, I heard somebody say in the interview essay, and I'm like, you're on Netflix. You should say the whole thing. But anyway, that's a bit of a digression. But yeah, so I think we're at the point where we can say, like, yeah, he sexually assaulted the women, but there's still this sort of like homophobia where the fact that he sexually assaulted men too is played off like, yeah, yeah, he likes men too, and that's bad. So that's really weird. Um, yeah, the other thought that I was having is because Puff Daddy has been, with this latest trial, he's been convicted and he's going to spend 50 months in prison with time served. So 50 months is about 4 years or something. So he'll be out of prison in about 3 years. And I have a sinking feeling that he is going to get out of this and he is going to run for president and people are going to elect him. That's my big prediction. Why do I say that? Because his personality is so like Donald Trump. First, he had this business and he was exploiting people to be successful. I think the thing that's a little bit different between there's obviously a couple of big differences between Donald Trump and Puff Daddy. The first big difference is that Puff Daddy, as exploitative as he was, did run a successful company. And I don't think that you could ever say that about Donald Trump. His most successful business has been being president, right? So that's one thing. And the other thing is that Trump's crimes, except for the sexual assault crimes, have been all connected to white collar crimes. He hasn't gotten down and dirty and tried to shoot somebody because that's not important in his public image. So, but that was important in Puff Daddy's public image. So, obviously, there's different cultures there. But I think also they're both a little bit incoherent when they talk. Like Puff Daddy, he, I don't know if he was always like so, but he was much more coherent when he was younger. So when he was younger and not doing so many drugs, he was very, very coherent. And now, later as he gets older, he's more and more incoherent. And he had a successful reality TV show, and so successful businessman. You can see where the fear would be about him becoming the next Donald Trump. Yeah, but hopefully, I think the problem is that the civil suits are civil suits. So even if he gets convicted 99 in 99 of those cases, I don't think anything is going to happen. He's going to get out of prison in 3 years. And because the people who are alleged to have arranged the hit on Tupac are dead, that nothing is going to happen there. And that's the most significant thing. So I could see him kind of pivoting when he gets out of prison. So I think I see two directions for him. One, he pivots out of prison and he goes into politics. And, he just escapes prison. Oh yeah, Donald Trump's never been to prison, unfortunately. So yeah, so Puff Daddy, he gets out of prison, he pivots to politics, and then he becomes rapidly successful because he was on television, right? I think the thing that might prevent that from happening is that you need to constantly be in the limelight, right? So Donald Trump finished The Apprentice and then he started his political career. And so Puff Daddy had an interlude between his reality show and now. So I think younger people are not going to have any sort of cultural memory of him because he's 50 years old. So, yeah. The other direction that I see could happen is that he might end up being, you know, like destitute. The founder, the co-founder of Bad Boy Entertainment, so this is also a crazy story that gets uncovered in the documentary. Probably it was public knowledge, it's just people didn't really care about it. So Puff Daddy founded Bad Boy Entertainment with a friend of his, and he put the ownership of the company into a kind of like 75% was owned by his mother and 25% was owned by his friend. But his friend did a lot of, like his mother didn't do any work in the company, but his friend did a lot of work to make it organized, to get it off the ground and make it successful. And then one day, for whatever reason, Puff Daddy came into his friend's office with a bat and said, "You're gonna like sign over your 25% to me and I will pay you back later." And of course, he never gets paid back. And then there's another suit, which was dismissed because I think the statute of limitations had expired or whatever. So basically, his friend became homeless and, he was ostracized in the music business for however long it's been. So I think that might be the direction Puff Daddy will go into because, no one's going to buy his records, and are people going to want to work with him? I don't know. I think the big damage to his career is probably the allegations about Tupac, because I think Tupac was vilified when he was alive, but I think he's become kind of like an icon to people like Jim Morrison or John Lennon. These people who were controversial, or like Amy Winehouse, because he's a martyr, right? And Notorious B.I.G. the same. Tupac more than Biggie, but both. So if he's connected to both of those people's deaths, then I think forgiveness would be really hard from the culture at large. But I think so in the field that he started in. So I think if he shifts to politics, I think he has a chance. I mean, he's certainly more coherent than Ye is. And I don't know. That's what I fear. I fear. Okay, I've been rambling about it. You should watch the documentary if you haven't, if you don't know this. Like, if you're interested in music or you're interested in true crime, it's a good documentary. But if you know the details, then maybe you can skip it. But what did you think about it? Let me know in the comments. If you like my reviewing style, please like and subscribe to my channel. I'm trying to get 150 subscribers by the end of January. And yeah, if you really like it, please check out the Patreon, which is in the link or the show notes. And if you're listening to this on Spotify, please drop me a follow. Thank you. Bye-bye.